There is a myth or a common misconception that when you repurpose your content, you're just sharing the same thing over and over again. So many times when I've spoken to people about content repurposing, they'll say to me, I want people to see me creating new content, and I don't want people to just keep seeing the same thing. So they think that repurposing will just result in their audience thinking that they lack originality, and it'll get very, very repetitive. But this doesn't have to be the case. Repurposing isn't regurgitating or being repetitive. So I'm going to share 6 techniques to ensure when you repurpose your content, you are not being repetitive. So number 1, change the format and the location of your content and make sure it's platform specific. So when I talk about format, I mean podcast episodes, videos, live videos, visuals like graphics, infographics and slide shares, interactive content like polls and surveys, maybe even membership content or online courses as well. So firstly, think about how you can repurpose by changing that format of your content. Now, for example, let's say that I wrote a blog post about my 10 best red wines from the Napa Valley. I could repurpose that into an infographic. Now, if I had a podcast, I could turn it into a podcast episode. I could also turn it into, say, a LinkedIn post, a slider or a carousel, a text post. Now, doing all of this is creative, right? It's interesting, it's different, and it will add value to your audience. It won't come across as sharing the same thing over and over again. Now, tip number 2 is to dig deeper with certain aspects of your message in your core content and work out how you can really break it down. For example, I mentioned that I could have a blog post, my 10 best red wines from the Napa Valley, and that could become a podcast episode, but maybe it could actually become 10 podcast episodes, so forming a 10-part series where I dig into each wine individually. Or it could become a number of different LinkedIn posts where I share what I look for in each wine, what led me to the decisions that I made in my blog post. So you can repurpose by digging deeper on certain points made and the key messages in the core content. Tip number 3 is to change the angle and look at things from a different aspect or a different perspective. For example, how about some storytelling content? Roll out your stories and share stories of others too. So with my 10 best red wines from the Napa Valley blog post, I could share stories of my experiences with the wines. And coming back to tip number 1, I could share these stories in all sorts of different formats as well. For example, a video on YouTube to Instagram stories content or LinkedIn content. So there's lots of great ways that I can share my stories about that post. And other ways to change the angle and look at things from a different aspect could be the potential to create things like how-to and instructional content based on your core content as well. Now, I just spoke about digging deeper with your messaging, but in fact, when you repurpose, you can also create much higher level messaging about your core message in your content. So instead of digging deeper, think about how you can create content that just skims the surface and then hopefully draws people in. Now, you could share other people's content on the topic as well that you respect and that you appreciate. Maybe if you were doing some research into your original topic and there were podcasts and blog posts and videos that you watched in order to create your content, then you could create a curation piece where you share all of that content together. And this is a great thing to do. This provides lots of additional information to your audience about the topic that you're talking about, but it also shows that you respect and admire other people's opinions and views, even if they're opposing views as well. So think about that, a curation piece. Now, other ideas are to break down various points that you make in your content into short, simple conversation starters. So don't forget to share your opinion as well. But this could be tweets, it could be LinkedIn posts, it could be Instagram story shares, whatever is right for you. But make sure that they are easy conversation starters that people can just really easily respond to. And it's okay to be slightly controversial as well. So thinking of things that could polarize your audience a little bit to get a good conversation going. Now, I'm not talking about starting arguments, but just starting conversations that people will be interested in. So for example, for my top 10 red wines from the Napa Valley, I could get conversations going about those wines if people agree with me, what their views are as well. So that's something great that you can do. Think about all of the different points that you make in your content and just how many conversations could be started in different ways on different platforms just through breaking them down and creating new content. So tip number 4 for not being repetitive with your content is to repurpose by using the interactive platform features. So you could run a poll, for example, on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram stories. You could do an ask me anything. In fact, you could even do a live stream. So again, coming back to my example, the 10 best red wines from the Napa Valley, I could do a live tasting where people join along with me and taste the wines too. And we walk through my 10 wines and I get other people's experiences and ideas and thoughts as well. So think about that. Think about how you could repurpose your content using all of these interactive features and live features as well with your audience to bring them in on the content and repurpose in a far more interactive way than maybe the typical, video to podcast, video to blog post, etc. So use the features available and involve your audience. Tip number 5 to avoid being repetitive is to use different titles for different content pieces. So for example, if you repurpose a video into video teasers, use different titles on the top of those teasers. If you repurpose your blog post to a Medium article, change the title and make some tweaks to the copy. Maybe you repurpose a video into a podcast episode, you could have a different title for the video and the podcast episode. So just think about, even though it may be a similar content and a similar message, you're looking at things from a different angle, a different format, so you can change the title of each piece of content as well. Don't use the same title across the board. And then tip number 6 is to not share your content all at once. So if you're creating evergreen content that isn't topical or only relevant just right now, but it's actually going to stand the test of time, then share your repurposed content over a longer period of time. This will really help you get over the feeling that you maybe are being a bit repetitive with your content and that your audience maybe think that you're not sharing original content. So if it's evergreen, then repurpose and then share over not just weeks, but maybe many weeks, maybe months, maybe even over the course of a year or 2. So share your repurposed evergreen content for as long as you think it's relevant and really spread it out so that message isn't being over communicated over a short period of time. So there you go, there's 6 ways that you can repurpose your content to ensure you're not being repetitive and you're continuing to bring value to your audience. Now, I totally get people who say, I don't want to repurpose because I think my audience want to see new content, but you're not repurposing effectively if you do just keep saying the same thing in your repurposed content. You need to work out how not to do that and how to be different and creative and unique with how you do your content repurposing.